What's up, fellas? Good evening. Hello, internet and
Hello.
chat worlds.
What's
Hello,
going on?
hello.
Yo.
Gosh, look at all this fine folks. Uh, Valandar, good to see you. Girk, Draftsnat, all sorts of folks. Mark, nice to see everybody. Good to be back. Good to see you folks.
Yeah, welcome back, Zach. Kind
Yeah,
of. I mean, you've been
it's
doing
been a
live
while.
play stuff, but
Yeah, I'll take your welcome back. It'd feel weird if it was from chat, but I'll take yours. Yeah.
What? Where's the best place to view chat? Facebook.
Twitch, probably at twitch.tv/Wogdy Live.
Done. I'm in.
Yes. Uh, Chat, we doing okay? I think we're doing okay. Yeah, yeah, we're not. We are actually awake, um, and we are celebrating. But yeah, it's been weird, and wild. Uh, yeah. So we're gonna get right into it tonight, folks. But yeah, we thought we'd do a Zweihander stream since it's Zweihander Day. I don't know if you
Heyo.
guys knew that, but yeah, before we do that, though, we'll give people a couple minutes to settle in here. I know, chat. Thanks for being patient as we got through some getting 5 people set up in here. But I had issues, Jared had issues, Daniel had issues. We all had issues tonight. So that's what we get for not
Are you
being
saying
on
we
here
all have
today.
issues, or we just had
I'm,
issues?
I'm
Yes.
saying that's why we work together because we all
That's
have issues.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So Daniel, is this the first time you've been on this side of the stream? The
It
Geek Scan show?
has, but I watched this on the YouTubes
Oh,
after
the
it comes
YouTubes.
out.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
Troy and John are the soothing sounds of my background when I'm at work.
Oh,
Soothing, the dulcet
Yeah.
tones.
oh, I'm
Dulcet
sorry.
tones. That's right. My
That's right.
ASMR while I work.
Yeah.
I am
That's
so sorry.
Yep.
yeah.
I'm
True
definitely a
story.
snooze fest, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's the first and only time Troy has been called dulcet tones.
That's right. Yes.
Um,
I don't know. An 8-hour recording of John doing ASMR? I'm for that.
yeah, I could listen.
We could make it happen.
John has put me to sleep many times, so
I put myself to
Oh,
sleep. I put my wife to sleep. I put,
yeah, yeah, no, it's great.
cut that Ben
Yeah.
Stein voice.
Yeah.
Shall we just get right down into it, fellas?
We
Just,
can.
do it.
dive
Yeah,
right
certainly.
in? Yeah, yep, yep. Cool. All right. Well, let's do this. Troy, are we recording? Are we good to go?
We are. We are indeed.
Now, Chad, I know we're diving straight in, but this is as usual, this is a casual conversation. So be a part of it. We welcome that. Ask your questions, make your comments, do your jabs, all the normal things. That's fantastic. All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geeks Camp, the home of RPG goodness and general tomfoolery. My name is Zach, and the hosts joining me this evening, we have 4 of them. We'll start off with the Mayor of Fort Wayne, Troy Sandlin.
Hooah!
Then the Dwarven DM, John Christian.
Baruch Kazad, my friends.
Oh. Then Jared, how you doing? Jared Nielsen?
I have nothing interesting to say.
Fair enough.
That's good.
That's how I feel.
That's like
every time.
that's a solid opener right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah. And then Daniel Fox, welcome to the show.
Aloha, everyone.
And chat, we'll acknowledge, say hey to the live chat. I see Craig just jumped in, and there's plenty of other folks. Good to see everybody. We really appreciate you hopping in on your Tuesday night to join us. We are going to have a little special episode tonight. This is the Geeks Can't Zweihander chat. If you're not aware, you probably are at this point, but Zweihander made its Kickstarter debut today with Zweihander Reforged, and we're super happy with how it's going. We hit our goal, and I think, Daniel, you tell me if I'm wrong here, my memory's wrong. I think we hit our goal in 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was
9
minutes and some number of seconds, and also the incredible. This is another interesting record too. We have officially surpassed any previous Zweihander Kickstarter, not only just in the first 9 hours, but of every campaign ever ran for Zweihander historically. So it's hats off to the entire team on that.
That's awesome.
Yes, and we're within not truly as in like today, but we have our eyes set on blackbirds now. So that's next target is can we hunt down blackbirds and overtake that? You can help us, chat. Yeah, we're what are we at? Like a little over 80,000 at the moment. So
84,380 right now.
Oh,
84,380. Good grief. I intentionally shut all of my browser windows when we started the stream. Otherwise, I'd be super distracted right now. So you can be distracted for me.
I got you.
Well, I have a story for that. My wife wanted to take me to dinner, and I was staring at my phone, and I said, every time we launch a Kickstarter, I just sit there and stare at my phone. And she goes, you need to put that away. So I did. And then every 30 minutes, she's calling out to me numbers, and it turns out she's more interested in stalking the Kickstarter than I was allowed to. So.
Yeah, I think
I'm
I heard...
upstairs trying to mind my own business, and she's calling out 74, 82.
Yeah, it was awesome. I heard a brief snippet of that conversation. I thought it was great. It sounded very familiar. You were like, she said something about, we're going to go to dinner, and you're like, yeah, give me 5 minutes. And she said, how about 4? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like something that's been told to me numerous times. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been good. So I think tonight, one of the things that I want to do is, Jared and Daniel and I have been pushing hard to get this Kickstarter to launch over the last few weeks. We haven't been doing it alone, of course. There's been a ton of writers and contributors in various ways helping get this project ready to go. Eric Alzendorf, Spider, that may be in chat from time to time here on Geekscant. He has been a tremendous help. But I thought that it might be fun, just like any other creator interview, any other creatives, I thought it might be fun to get the Zweihander crew in here and let Troy and John put them on the spot and allow them to ask any questions or noodle around or pick at the project in any way that they want to. And I've got some things that we can kind of wander through as well if these two yahoos fail me and stall out.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
Right.
John. Yeah, no, I have extreme faith in you, John. So I think we could start there, but listen, you guys can go look at the Kickstarter. I'd encourage you to do so. Follow along that way. We'll post the links as well. But John, let's start with you. If you have the Zweihander crew here and you've looked at the projects, you've heard it's coming. What questions might you have about the project or about Zweihander as a whole?
So okay, I think that so I've played Zweihander. I've watched other people play it. I've enjoyed the initial edition, right, for quite a bit now. I think that, and it's probably maybe it's a little bit too early to ask it. Maybe this is like not the first thing that you throw out there, but I think it's probably the question that most people have on their lips, and that is why Reforge is right? Because we asked the same question of D&D, why the 2024 version, why a 3.5, why a 3.0, et cetera, et cetera. What was the impetus and the motivator to move to a Reforged edition?
That's a wonderful question, and let me first start by saying, as a gamer and a collector and somebody who's played every edition of D&D, I personally grate every time a new edition of D&D comes out. One, because I know I'm going to spend a bunch of money to buy it, because I love D&D. But also, it's always a challenge of what do I need to do to my existing campaign to get my characters converted over?
Mm-hmm.
So when way back when, and I say way back when, I mean like year and a half, 2 years ago, when Reforged was kind of in its infancy, I just came off of writing the starter kit with James Intercasso. And one of the things that he and I and Anna Goldberg and Kate Bullock spoke about was, well, we've learned a lot through this exercise. We've taken a very different editorial lens to how we're designing the game. We're reworking a lot of the mechanics. We're ironing out the wrinkles. And most importantly, that work was informed by the feedback we've been getting from the community for years at this point. So the starter kit comes out. And in the meanwhile, this Reforged edition was kind of slowly coalescing in the background. And the conversation I had after we got Reforged manuscript out the door was, okay, well, what if we create a bigger book? What if we not re-edition, but remaster what's there. So with that in mind, I put a single post-it note on my design board, and I don't have it here, but it's at my work office. However, it said no new editioning. And so we set out with Reforged to remaster what was there, and most importantly, make it cross-compatible with previous books. This goes back to my frustration with having to buy a new edition. Will my adventures that I've bought be compatible? What do I need to do with my players? How long is it going to take them to bring it up to speed? Oh, I'm excited about these new mechanics, but on the same token, I have to spend all this time as a game master preparing like a whole new game. So with that in mind, Reforged was created from the seed of cross-compatibility. We wanted that to be built into the system. And I think, according to our playtesters, which, I'm a little bit biased. I run a group on Sundays and Wednesdays. Everyone seems to agree it's compatible. The fandom will be the best judge. However, I will say that we've done a number of blind play tests over the past 6 months. We've gotten a lot of good critical feedback, and where there were places where it wasn't compatible, we ironed out the wrinkles. And I if you read the Session 0 release today on Drive-Thru RPG, you can kind of see where that journey started. And if you have the revised core rulebook, you can kind of take them side by side and say, okay, yeah, I see how these things work together. So there's that. The other side is a need to improve what came before, not just from a rules perspective, but a narrative perspective. I think it'd be disingenuous to say that Zweihander wasn't somewhere within the RuneQuest / Maelstrom / Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay family when it comes to mechanics. We carried through some of those same narrative beats into Zweihander, but the way the game was being played was nothing like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. In fact, a lot of the feedback we would get from people who are using Zweihander, they're adapting it to their own Dark Fantasy campaigns. So we knew we need to strip away the vestiges of those narrative beats and introduce a lot of our own. So Reforged kind of became this this new version, if you will, this new edition. I hate to use the word edition because it's not really an edition. However, it takes a new approach to the narrative, and it has a much larger design team, which is fantastic because revisiting that material, 7-8 years later after having written written the manuscript back in 2014, it's like night and day difference looking at what came before versus what the team pulled together now.
It's great. It's masterfully stated, by the way. I think I was talking to my wife about this before we. She'd asked, what's the show about? She always asks, and because she's polite, she asks, and then she typically, like, the 1,000-foot stare happens, like a cow looking at an oncoming train whenever I begin to explain to her what we're talking about. But tonight she really was interested because we talked quite a bit about my apprehension at a new revision of D&D and things like that. So I think that there was some good previous conversation synergy with what we were talking about tonight. And the way that I tried to explain it to her from what I've read and what I've seen and some of the conversations that I've had with Zach and also about kind of the project as it's unfolded is it's almost like a Criterion version or a director's cut of a film, right? It's still the same movie. It's still got all the same beats. It's not like it's not the Donner cut, right? Where it's like it's almost like a completely new edit. This is just like a refinement or a special edition of it, where it's still the same movie, but there are things that are honed and things that are sharpened and things that are a couple areas that are smoothed over, which I can really appreciate because it is. I suffer from the nothing is ever finished, only abandoned. Right. At one point or another, you have to let it go. The manuscript has to go out the door. You can't refine forever. So years later, you go back and you look at it. You're like, oh, well, I've improved my own design style and my own philosophies and things like that. I wonder what I could do with it now. Right. And it doesn't. I don't know that it necessarily requires a full blown edition. So I appreciate what you're trying to do. I could totally see that as a designer myself.
Yeah.
Wanting to go back and wanting to kind of like smooth the rough edges and then produce something that people can still enjoy everything that they've enjoyed about it before, right? And work as hard as you can towards being faithful and reverent to your own work previously and the things that people fell in love with.
Yeah, there's, I think as we are all designers around the table here, I think, one thing we can certainly appreciate is that your craft improves as you practice. And every new game, every new adventure, every time you put your pencil to the proverbial paper, you're practicing, and you're not practicing to like create your magnum opus. You're practicing to get better at your craft and producing more and more work. And I think that, personally for me, looking backwards, when I first started writing Zweihander, I had never written anything in my entire life. I'm dyslexic, so writing was always a challenge for me. And then two, I never wrote anything near an adventure or a book. Like I was just simply game master on my own game table. So I had some help along the way, which is great. But now I can look backwards and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I've improved in such and such areas. I can easily say that I have a tendency to be a little bit loquacious. I have a tendency to bury rules in prose. And I think while I love prose and I love the storytelling element, it's very hard to produce a good game that's usable at the table if you're burying all the rules, 5 paragraphs deep. So for me at least as a designer, I appreciate the opportunity to continue not just working on my own, but having other people kind of fill in my blind spots. And also learning from them. I am no master writer. I'm a forever student, and that's what I see every time I write something new or create something new. I see it as like another practice round. Not to say that Reforged is another practice round for another edition. However, I do see it as that. I do see it as like the craft is never perfect. And to your point, there's only so much finessing you can do until you just have to let it go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like gestating a child. At some point, the child has to be born, so you have to let it go. So I think as a designer, like that to me is like the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most satisfying. Once it goes to layout, then it's really real.
Oh, right, exactly.
No longer just words in Google Docs.
I feel that so deeply. Once it's gone, and you're like, oh man, because what I've learned not to do is never look at what I sent. Like once it goes to editing in particular, once the editor gets a hold of it, I don't look at it again for any other refinements that I want to do personally until I get feedback. And then once it comes to me and it goes to layout, I even loathe to look at the finished product, because I'll go back through it and I'll not second guess necessarily, but like, oh man, I could have added a little bit of something here, or I could have reworded it there. So I feel that, and especially burying things under narrative, because I'm loquacious, very verbose as well, as Troy and Zach can probably tell you, I'm sure. I got to take a hatchet to my stuff in order to get it out the door. So I feel that pretty deeply.
There's a great editorial group that's on Twitter that I absolutely love following their feed. It's called the Darling Axe, and they're an editorial group which advocates for like being better editors of your work. It's a service, but regardless, I think it's a brilliant term, because there is a point where you feel so precious about your words, and the reality is like no matter how precious you feel about the things that you've written, the things that you created, like handing it off to somebody else is actually good. Not only just good for you emotionally, but it's also better for the work. I dare say that editors are probably even more important than the designer. The editor is the gatekeeper of ensuring that what you write makes sense. And I'm a big believer in like you need kind of 3 people to be able to find a consensus around what works for games and what doesn't. 2 people, I can convince, one person can convince anybody else of something else. So it's editor, writer together. Like I have a tendency to kind of shy away from that, but I've got a great team of writers and narrative designers who work on Zweihander, present company included, around the table here too. So it's, to me, like great writing comes from that editorial process, the process of letting go, the process of, and I know everyone can identify with this, hating the thing you create. And because it's like you're driving toward the end, and it's like it becomes somewhat painful. But the moment you let go, the moment you give it to an editor, the moment you kind of let it go and let it be on its own, you learn to kind of love it again. And it doesn't get that. It doesn't. I typically don't find it comes that way. I don't find that I love something again until it comes back to me from the editor.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's really healthy. It's a healthy way of looking at it. Is the catharsis of letting it go. Right? It is what it is at this point, and we'll catch it. Maybe we'll refine it in Reforged 2, or in the sequel. Right? We'll come back around to it, and that's kind of what that's there for, right?
Is that Reforged?
Yeah.
Reforged.
Reforged, re-edited, remastered.
That's right.
Well, Here's a fun anecdote. When D&D 5th edition was released, they had 10 pages of errata. And I think anytime you can produce something with less than 10 pages of errata, that's kind of a measure of success. Consider this, like D&D is a very large design studio, and they have numerous people with their hands in editorial, in writing, in design. So I think it just goes to show that there is no such thing as a perfect RPG. It is the quintessential RPG, and it's not a perfect game. It still has errors because it's just the nature of writing and editorial and book publishing. But we do our best, right, to make sure everything's like buttoned up just so. But I guarantee any RPG that comes out, whether it's Pathfinder or Daggerheart or D&D or Zweihander Reforged, it will have errata. It's just the nature of writing and creation.
Yeah.
So no remastered, but remastered errata probably.
In chat, and I think it kind of goes along with this. I'm gonna pitch it to Jared here.
Yeah.
And then Troy, if you have follow up as part of it or something else, I think that's great too. But chat was asking, let me see if I pull it up here. 8-Bit says, this successful Kickstarter shows a great interest in Zweihander. Any other plans for future Kickstarters for Zweihander? Jared, I know we've got a few projects that we can talk about on the Zweihander front in the future. Do you want to speak to some of those? I don't know. We may have lost him.
His audio may have cut out.
Yeah, we'll give him a second here, but if not, we can still speak to it. I promise. Well, this is just a suspense building. Right?
Cue the music. Cue the dulcet tones of John.
I can.
Let's make sure I can
start
respond.
reading from.
There you go. There you go.
Oh man, I was about to start reading from like the Canticle of the Dragon or something like that. So it's fine. It's fine.
Oh jeez, no, please.
Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I don't think I'm able to talk. Yeah.
We can hear you. We can hear you. You're good. You're good. It's all good. We'll move on. We'll let you catch up somehow. I think we're maybe out of sync in the stream or something. So Daniel, how about I take up?
My audio is delayed by about a whole minute.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see here.
Yeah, but my audio is delayed by an entire minute.
Okay, no worries. So let's go at it this way then. I'll take a quick stab at it, and then if Jared gets his stuff on his end synced up, or if Daniel, you want to butt in with any of this, that's a quick note. I think we can talk about two projects safely. Is that a fair statement, Daniel? Before I go any further.
Oh yes, and you should talk about Dark Astral.
Yeah. So we're very much committed to two projects on the docket aside from Zweihander Reforged. The first will be Gangs of Cahabro. If you've been following Daniel's journey over the last couple of years, you've been seeing that he's been heavily playtesting Gangs of Cahabro. The vision for it at the moment, and it'll probably be a late 2024 Kickstarter, that type of range. But we target this being a setting book, the first truly official setting book for Zweihander. That isn't a whole new standalone RPG, but is a world for you to play in. And I think, like, as someone who has been a small tiny fraction of the Gangs of Cahabro playtest, I think you're going to find something really cool with like urban gang warfare in a fantasy setting. It's going to give you a world to play in, give you some cool stuff there, but also give you some ideas about how does a fantasy RPG change when you go urban. Because if it just feels the same and you use the same skills and talents and weapons and gear, it's going to end up feeling very similar, and you're going to be doing very similar things. So I don't know that we can speak a heavy amount to what that book's going to contain, but I think that there will definitely be some rules about putting together your own gangs.
Yeah.
And things like that. Jared, do you want to speak any more to that, Daniel?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think that, the quick pitch for Gangs of Cahabro is, imagine if you took the Warriors, the movie, and mashed it together with like medieval Venice. And we've been running this campaign setting, I mean, really since D&D, AD&D second edition. So for many years, I ran my own game table. However, we've been playing it throughout the editions of D&D. We've been playing in Zweihander for almost 7 years, and Adam Rose and I, who are kind of the co-creators on it, we thought, well, let's make something with it. Let's actually produce it for Zweihander. So we've been play testing this Zweihander version, if you will, for the past 2.5-3 years, without any inclination at the time to actually produce anything. But now it's like a reality. So we're working on that kind of in parallel with Reforged. And fortunately, we've had the ability to playtest a lot of Reforged in Gangs of Gehabro. But within that, we've kind of spun off our own kind of unique ideas around what weapons look like in a city when weapons are considered illegal. Which is kind of a unique twist on how we treat improvised weapons and their related weapon tricks. So you wouldn't be toting around a sword, but you may be carrying around a billiards cue, or you may be carrying a gauntlet crossbow that's hidden inside your sleeve, or perhaps even you have procured a rare pyre shot pistol. So you have these knaves, for lack of a better term, tackling and conquering gang territory in Gehabro. And you have kind of two game patterns. You have one where you're the character and you're kind of playing through the stories of what it means to be a gang and conquer territory. And then there's the zoomed out portion where you're actually investing into your haunts, which are your kind of hideouts. You have rookeries that you capture. There are 42 rookeries or 42 boroughs in the city. And as you capture more boroughs, you have the opportunity to vie for one of the top 6 seats in the Union, which is a, lack of a better term, like a noble thieves guild of many different street gangs. So these are people who wear their proverbial gang colors on their sleeves. They dress ostentatiously, much like the characters in the Warriors. They don't hide who they are, and it's been a real pleasure being able to do this with Zweihander, because Zweihander seems to be the right engine for it. So we've kind of committed to creating this campaign setting along with a number of new human cultures, weapon tricks, new unique professions, talents, creatures. It kind of takes what's in Reforged and it shows you what you can do when you kind of thrust those rules into an urban gang warfare setting.
That's great. You first of all, you had me at the Warriors.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all,
I can dig it.
Oh my god. The second was as you were kind of explaining it, also the territorialism and kind of like there's like the intergang politics, right? Also felt a little bit like, especially in wearing it on their sleeve in particular, maybe think of it like a Gangs of New York, too.
Yes,
right, kind of thing,
yes.
you know? Like in your face. It's like gang pride, right? There's no hiding it. You walk by the cops and you've got you already got your colors or your that's great.
Well, I think it's one thing too that I really liked about what we've done with Gangs of Gehabro was, like, it'd be one thing to say, well, you're a bunch of thieves running around the city, but in Gangs of Gehabro, the gangs they're actually called themselves guilds.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that they're noble and upright, and that they call their collection of guilds the Union. So they believe they have political power, which they kind of do, and they treat it as a noble affair. And this is a good, interesting takeaway from the original book for Gangs of New York, where early gangs in the Four Corners kind of saw themselves as these kind of political people who were standing up for, you know, the immigrant groups, for the people who were impoverished, for those who are being you know, crushed by the British. So you had this kind of deep sense of nationalism around it as well. And we've kind of worked some of that into Gangs of Gehabro too. I just saw a question, actually, or sorry, a comment from Eric Spider. Rebel Streets, New York Street Gangs and Studies is a great documentary. I've seen that. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
What's that on?
Is that Rebel Kings? You can find it's probably on YouTube. Honestly, it's so old you can probably find it streaming there. It's excellent though. As a child of the 90s, I grew up on gangster rap, although that has some small influence over the game. I would say that, having seen the Warriors at a very young age, the first R-rated film I ever saw, that and Purple Rain, I was like, oh my God, like how can this turn into like a D&D game? So instead of having motorcycles, you have horses. And it's, and I think it's a really fun thing.
Wait,
I think people
you,
love it when we show a little bit more about it.
you wanted to turn Purple Rain into a D&D game?
Yes. I'm a big believer that horses shouldn't be treated as horses as we see them in Lord of the Rings, but they should be treated as motorcycles. Horses are motorcycles in the medieval world. So you can, in fact, do Sons of Anarchy in Zweihander with Gangs of Gehavro.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I can see this, and it's really freaking me out.
Yeah.
By the way, Rubble Kings is on Vimeo, Plex, and on let's see, and it's on YouTube for $3.
There you go.
There's a gang in Gehavro. They're called Bad Company, and each gang has a motto. And for Bad Company, because this is kind of influenced by, of course, I'm a white suburban kid, so I love gangster rap in the '90s. Their motto was "Pop the bottle, partake of the potion, lead the steed in the 3-hoof motion." I've taken all this love of like hip hop, as I do, and kind of worked it into a lot of the lore behind Gangs Gehavro as well. So those who are hip hop heads will find something to love in there too.
That's hot. I love it.
Nice.
And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, and we'll go real light touch here, but on the opposite end of the spectrum in 2025, you can expect a couple of years ago, Daniel put out Dark Astral. It's kind of like this chapbook, like 100-page, basically a book of a concept pitch for what does Zweihander look like as a sci-fi game. And so we've had Daniel's talked about seeing a lot of interest, and Troy and I have talked to people at the booth in the last year that are like, what about Dark Astral? So we're going to try to make good on that promise with a full offering on Dark Astral in 2025. That is going to be sci-fi, but with an Old Testament twist.
Old Testament twist.
Yeah.
Interesting. Pillar of fire by night, pillar of cloud by day.
You're in the right ambiance there. Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be humanity's. I think the concept that kind of is stuck in my craw is like humanity is kind of in the middle, right? Just and there are, just like in Zweihander, if in Reforged you have malignancies and corruption that, as you get pulled towards the abyss or towards demonic influence or things like that, you take on those. And I think the thing that has kind of stuck in my craw is thinking about once we get out into the stars and into the realms of the beyonders and things like that, like what does it look like when there's not just the abyss at play, but the divine is also to somewhat at play, and what does the divine mean in a grimdark setting? I think it's probably not going to be the answer that you think. And we say Old Testament because if you think about what does the divine look like and how does it present itself in the Old Testament, I think there's some. It's not golden humans with dove wings of a dove. It's very strange phenomena. So I think that'll be the fun play, is like Zweihander in space, but with more of an exploration of what different forces are at play in the stars and how do they pull against humanity is kind of caught in the middle.
And to put a finer point on this too, I'll be the first to admit I'm not a massive fan of science fiction. There are science fiction films that I love, but science fiction is not my forte. And when Zach and I started talking about that Dark Astral, it was very clear and evident to me that he has a vision for Dark Astral that's not simply Warhammer 40k Catholicism. We kind of bandied about this idea of like, what if you took the Torah and Talmud and tried to tell a story using that as kind of its rabbinical roots. I think Zach has a very interesting vision for Dark Astral, and he is the project lead, and he will be at the center of everything Dark Astral. I'll be on the periphery as perhaps editor, but I will not be its progenitor or future creator. So I'm very happy to kind of see it in Zach's hands, being a fan of Scrap Rats, but also it's very clear to me that he has a deep appreciation. Sorry, not to talk about you like you're not in the room, Zach, but he has
We
deep
do it all the time.
appreciation for weird science fiction, and to me, that's awesome. It's what I love about Dune. It's what I love about good sci-fi, and I have no doubt in my mind that Zach is going to really do something really cool that I would have never considered a Dark Astral. So I'm really happy to see that we collectively are doing something with it with World of Game Design.
I see a couple questions in chat, but before I hit up those, Troy, I want to give you a moment here. Are there notes, questions, thoughts that you want to throw into the mix?
Yeah, since you put me on the spot, I might try and put you guys on the spot.
Awesome.
So, the lead up to this, I've seen a lot of talk about, different comments I've seen on some of the posts leading up to the Kickstarter launch and things like that. And I do very much enjoy Zweihander. I think it's an awesome system. I've had a great time playing it. The little that I've gotten to play it, I think it's got a lot of potential. There's things that I want to use it for, hopefully down the road when we start venturing to other IPs.
Yes.
But that aside, there are some detractors out there. And a lot of what I see is the whole second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay thing. So put that to bed. Finally put that to rest. Why did you take that system that wasn't really being used at the time? What inspired you about that specific system that made you think, you know what, there's something really cool here, but I think it needs to be done like this.
Yeah.
And then Zweihander come about. Because I feel like the people that are making those comments are very closed-minded, and if you're listening to that and that offends you, I don't care. Because
Classic Troy.
Yeah. Well, because it goes along the same lines of everybody complaining about D&D. The people that are creating games like Zweihander, that have created Morkborg, that have created Mothership, and all these other games that we love, more than likely probably did some hacking on whatever edition of D&D they started with to begin with, and that's how they learned how to create and design. So the same with, you took a system that had been largely abandoned and made it into something that I think is really cool. So why and how walk us through that path so that maybe people can finally get the answer that they're complaining about.
Well, way back in the yesteryear of D&D 4th edition, my group immediately bounced off of it. We were like, we were already struggling with D&D as is to kind of tell the stories we wanted to tell. We were telling at the time very dark and mature stories, and we had house rolled D&D so much that it just wasn't doing what we needed to do. So I was talking, I was at Tabletop Game and Hobby in Overland Park, Kansas, where Phil Kilgore, the owner of the store, and I were just kind of talking. He's like, well, Daniel, you should check out Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition. It was published by Green Ronin. It's a really, really cool game I think you would like. And I'm like, well, diehard D&D guy. I've only ever played Palladium games and GURPS and early MERP, but a lot of D&D. I was like, I just don't want to try a new system. So he gave me a beat up returned copy that sat on my shelf for 6 months. And my group and I were just really having a lot of difficulty. D&D 4th edition isn't working. We know 3rd edition's now gone. We didn't want to do the Pathfinder. It was a little too crunchy for us. But most importantly, the rules weren't helping us tell deep narrative stories. So I picked up Warhammer off the shelf one day. I was like, well, the skill-based system is pretty cool. Oh, and I love how elementary percentile dice are. You know what your chances for success are. You don't have to do any math in the back of your head. You know what your chances are immediately. It's like, oh, and this cool career system, like you could be anything. So I took that as the kind of the seed, and I actually dove a little deeper into the history of Warhammer, which I'm sure some people who know Warhammer fairly well probably understand, but Warhammer was not the first to perfect the profession-based system. It was Maelstrom. It was RuneQuest. In fact, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay sits in that family of games. And all signs point back to Maelstrom. And Maelstrom is a fantastic game. If you've never checked it out, you'll see some very striking similarities between Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition and Maelstrom, up to and including the equipment lists. But both are equally excellent. So I dove into the history of Warhammer around the system itself because I knew that I didn't want to use the Warhammer world because I have my own campaign world I designed. But I also recognized that if, I was creating something, simply for my friends and I to play. And they pushed me to put it out on Strike to Stun, like one of the first web forums I ever posted on my entire life. I was not a web forum person. This is way back in 2012, I think. And I was like, hey, here's our house rules for Warhammer we're using for our home campaign. And then some people started talking about it. And then Warhammer 3rd edition comes out, which I love. I love 3rd edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I think it's really innovative in the things that it did. But I know that a lot of the fans didn't like it. So I had this grand vision. Like, what if I could take this version of house rules we've used for our own campaign world and turn it into a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay retro clone? And what we discovered during that process is that it was anything but. It had a lot of it had the semblance of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay from a rules perspective, which I love, the profession-based system, the percentile-based combat. But what it did differently was the way that it treated wounds. By using thresholds. It treated combat differently. I love Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre. I knew I wanted an action point based system to change how the fights worked. And I also thought there was a lot of simplicity we could introduce that would make it drift from what Warhammer was doing around injuries, around afflictions, around disorders, around spells. So that is what we kind of started with, and that became Zweihander, which was initially pitched as a retro clone, but what we've discovered, much like how we use it around our own game table, that a lot of people weren't using it for Warhammer. They're using it for something very, very different, and I think that speaks to, I think it's easy to kind of brush it off as a retro clone because it definitely started somewhere along there, as most retro clones do, but then it ends up doing its own thing. Kind of like Merkborg does its own thing, and the ways that other retro clones do their own thing, they kind of develop their own identity. I would say that the most difficult part of Zweihander is kind of divorcing those identities of Warhammer versus Zweihander, and it's a pretty big exercise for us. We'll get there by continuing to release new adventures, new campaigns, and such. But I think Reforged really sets the stage for how we are drifting far off the road from where it started, looking back at Maelstrom, looking back at Runecrest, looking back at Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, and seeing how it does its own thing. In particular, and this is one of the things I loved about Warhammer too, is this idea of dooming, influencing your character. With Reforged, we actually say your character dies during character creation. How cool is that in Traveler to have your character die?
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, and I was like, that's a really cool idea. What if that became a story driver? A narrative story driver, and how if we mechanized it, and what if we had these really cool scars? So Reforged really was this kind of synthesis of the things that we loved and disliked about these older games, and we were able to say, okay, now we can pull away everything that's Warhammer-ish, say for the profession system, and we can redevelop everything into something that is its own distinct identity. And I think we accomplished it. We'll see. Fans will tell us. We have a breezy idea what it could be, and fans will have a very different perspective. But I do think that I would also like to respect the fact that people do use it for Warhammer. That's perfectly fine. At the time when it was made, there were no other Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay retro clones, and despite the fact that some of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay fandom didn't really like 3rd edition, I thought it was brilliant. That dice mechanic where you're reading the runes essentially when you cast dice is. I know there's a lot of moving parts to that game and people didn't like because it felt like a board game, but honestly, there's a lot of things there that I think from a UX perspective and user experience at the table, that's pretty damn brilliant. And I don't think it gets enough. I don't think it gets enough praise for it. But all that aside, I hope that answers your question. It's a long way of answering it, but I hope it gets us to where we need to get to, at least for this conversation.
Well, I expected a long answer because it wasn't just being big. Well, because I wanted to. That would have been boring. No, because I had played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition one time, and I kind of bounced off of it for whatever reason. I mean, years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
But then playing when we played Zweihander, it was like it was kind of like, oh, I can see how this could really, take you down a different path.
Yeah.
So when I'm at the booth and people come up, it's like, well, I've never heard of Zweihander. Can you explain it to me? And I said, I'll tell you what. It's D&D if D&D was mean.
I love it.
and they're like, oh. And usually if they're into that kind of thing,
yeah,
if they're into a little bit more grit and realism, they're hooked.
Yeah.
If they want more of like the super heroic, I'm going to level 20 kind of a thing with no scars, they're going to bounce off of it anyway. There's really not a whole lot you're going to sell them on. But yeah, then they're like, okay, tell me more. And then so we start talking.
One of the things that I don't know that we've got it up on the site yet, but Daniel and I did a fun study, kind of an exercise. John, I think both of you would have found this interesting, but I think John, you could have got a kick out of my attempts here a little bit. But we did this study where we said, I'm trying to remember exactly how we did it. I think what we did was we started off with kind of like an XY axis graph.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, what are the hallmarks of what makes an RPG, like a fantasy RPG, its own thing, right? Like what are the dials, what are the knobs that you can turn within it? And so we talked about like tactics versus narrative gameplay, right? Like how does a game skew one towards the other? We talked about simplicity of design versus complexity of design. We talked about heroic fantasy versus dark fantasy. The idea of in heroic fantasy, you're assuming that the players are playing heroes, and the supposition is that they're going to succeed against adversity, but they're going to succeed. The dark fantasy being that we're not supposing that the characters are necessarily playing heroes, and we're not guaranteeing or we're not assuming that they're probably going to succeed at most of their objectives, right? There's some variety there. And then what was the other? We had two graphs. Do you remember what the other axis was there?
Yeah, we were going heroic versus not dark fantasy, but mundane. I can't recall what those two were. We need to put that article up. I think it's a really interesting exploration, not just only of Zweihander, but other games as well. Like how you could plot out Merkborg, Warhammer, D&D, Pathfinder, Shadow the Demon Lord. We plotted out like 9 or 10 RPGs on these axes, and I found it to be kind of pretty enlightening. It helped me better understand what quadrant I was in as far as the types of games that I like. We got to put that up on the site though. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I bring that up though because I think one of the things to kind of get to Troy's point here, right, or to Troy's note, is we were thinking about like why Zweihander, or like where does Zweihander fit in all this, and does it make, where is it playing that makes it different? And I like what you said, Troy. It's like imagine D&D if mean. It was traditional versus modern design.
Yeah,
that was the fourth one. So traditional, modern, simplicity, complexity, narrative, tactical, and heroic fantasy, dark fantasy. And what we found is that there are certainly similarities that Zweihander has to certain games. So if you think about like Shadowdark, obviously there's a lot of like attitude that we share with Shadowdark in certain respects there. And obviously Shadowdark is looking at a more modern element of design, which I think Zweihander is in a lot of ways too. But there are certainly avenues where we're different than Shadowdark. Obviously that's more focused on dungeon crawls and things of that nature. It's playing in its own field that way. It's a little bit more heroic, even though it has a name like Shadowdark. It's a little bit more heroic. It assumes heroism more often than not, things of that nature. And it's a pretty simple game, which is a good thing for that system. And so what we found though is we're comparing all these things and we're laying them out on graphs. What we found is that the games that Zweihander is the closest to in certain areas, it's the furthest away from in those other areas.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, John, the cool thing that I think we kind of stumbled upon is that we really feel like, as far as like crunch, complexity, and being tactical, Zweihander is similar to things like Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, like as that level of depth. But almost all of like the darker fantasy games are on the opposite end of that spectrum, where they tend to be more narrative driven, more simple in design, where the rules aren't as crunchy. And so it was really fascinating because it really said, like, if you are a fan of D&D and you want to go dive into something different, but you like the crunch, like Zweihander is a good choice for you. Um, um, but it kind of showed that like Zweihander carves out this quadrant where at least games that are actively, heavily being played right now in this year, there's really not another game that ticks all of the same boxes of these quadrants, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, the dark that quadrant's kind of it's dark fantasy, medium crunch, tactical, and MCDM did this really interesting exercise when they were kind of pitching their RPG to fans about the three things that kind of stand out about their game, and in a very very cogent way. And if I was to kind of say, like what are the three things that are thematically that the Zweihander does? It's that it's a little tactical. It's kind of mildly crunchy, and it's definitely dark fantasy. And Troy, I love how you pitch it at conventions. I always pitch it as D&D with consequences.
Yes.
Where you have to deal with the messy moral aftermath of being either a murder hobo or just making really hard moral choices. I think it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I saw how when my friend Brian started playing Warhammer Fantasy, how it affected our D&D games. Because there's a similar element to that of like there are ramifications for your actions. When you go in and you just charge into a goblin encampment because there are goblins and they're evil, right? And then you there's like a straw hat on the floor and you lift it up and you see that there's a birthday cake underneath it where you just killed the goblin. It was his birthday, or just he would add things like that into it to show that like murder hoboing has like an echoing effect inside of the game as opposed to what we were all just used to. It's like there was no moral ambiguity at all. That's a bad thing, a bad guy, and if I let them just run rampant, they're gonna do bad things. So I have to stop them ahead of time. The easiest way to do that is just go ahead and kill them, right? So when you're thinking like the teenage, like at that teenage level of like hack and slash and go, right? Then there's I think there's kind of like an evolution in the way that you run the way you think about adventures and how narrative is affected by the consequences of your actions.
Yeah, I think that I think there's room definitely in the industry, and I say this as somebody who loves beer and pretzel games. Sometimes I just want to play Diablo at the game table. I want to smash things with my D20 until they go away. But there's also stories I want to tell a little bit more nuanced. And in those cases, there aren't any faceless enemies. These are people, although they may be grotesque or monstrous looking, whatever it may be. These are people with lives and histories and families and stories to tell. And I love putting my own players in tough moral positions where no matter what choice they make, it's not going to be the right choice, but it is most importantly going to change the way that the player behaves and the way that the character reacts in the world. And to me, being able to like create these not just narrative consequences, but mechanical consequences for tough moral choices is really where Zweihander kind of distinguishes itself from its predecessors within the RuneQuest tree and Warhammer tree. It does have mechanics and narrative consequence for tough choices. So while like I said, I certainly do love playing D&D, and sometimes I just want to smash goblins with my D20 and get a big sword and do that whole thing. But there's also another side of storytelling where I want to do something a little bit more mature and complex, and I think that's typically why people kind of come to Zweihander, because it does do some of that. And I don't know, that's I don't know. I think it's been really hard for me as a game master to find games that can do that well. And I think that's kind of what Zweihander was a response to what I wanted to see. Just like every game is a response to some other game. People oftentimes say, well, this and this mechanic from wherever else. I always say it came from Greg Stafford. Greg Stafford created every game mechanic under the sun that Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson didn't. But every game is born from some other game, and just like Pathfinder was, just like Shadow Dark was, just like Merkborg was, just like Mothership was. Every game started somewhere from some seedling, and it starts with the question: what if I change the game to do the thing that I want it to do for me at my game table? And that is how games are created, small and large.
We've got several questions in chat that I think we can rattle off pretty quickly here. I want to make sure that we cover some of these. One that was asked several minutes ago at this point, and I thought it was a good one. We talked about errata early on in our conversation.
Yeah.
And Daniel, 8-Bit asked, do we anticipate errata being updated into the PDFs?
Yes. And I say that with a very emphatic yes, full stop, period. And here's why I feel so strongly about this. One of the challenges when Zweihander was at Andrews McNeil's, they took a very traditional, conservative approach to how you approach digital books, in the sense that it was still like a new frontier for them. So being able to take community errata and playtester errata and regularly update PDFs was a near impossibility. So I had to circumvent that through our friends over at Grim and Parallel Studios with Adam Rose and Nick O'Hare. They would update the errata for us on our behalf. It's a little easier when you're an independent creator. I would say at World of Game Design, we are community first, and I think one big part of being community first is ensuring that you're providing the best gaming experience you possibly can. Now, we can't obviously update physical books, but we can update PDFs, and we can curate that and update it and let people know when new PDFs are released. So the long and short answer is yes, absolutely, we'll update the PDFs, as should any publisher.
Perfect. So we've got some more questions here I want to cover. Questions about I'll cover this one, I guess, as someone who's been teaching a lot of new people recently. So 8-Bit is also asking, and then I think we'll kind of like roll this into Craig's question too. So 8-Bit is asking, would you say this Zweihander is new player friendly? And then Craig is asking, do you think this game really requires a campaign to get the full benefits? Did you see character growth corruption? That character growth and corruption in the game, and jumping in from one shot, you don't really get to experience all those things. So I think both of those we could kind of answer, I think, at the same time, or at least I'll do my best, which is what Craig is noticing is something that I noticed too, especially with Revised Edition. I think that we're trying to address some of these things with Reforged. You guys tell us if we did a good job. But I think what Craig is noticing is that the core idea of the game isn't overly complex and you can pick up and go, right? Like, I've been teaching a lot of new people over the past year at conventions how to play Zweihander. And up until the last one, we've been doing Revised, which is more complex. And people can really typically grasp the core concept of the game, which is you're rolling a skill test, you're shooting for a target number, you're rolling D100, right? Like, it's pretty straightforward. And because you're doing that every single time for every single roll, you aren't asking them to figure out a whole bunch of extra steps. When you do combat, you're still doing the same thing. Still a skill check. Casting spell, still a skill check. Everything is tied to that ecosystem. So it makes a lot of sense. But what Craig is noticing, and what we notice as well, is that we baked into the character sheet and part of the core game these side ideas. Like corruption is a good one. Corruption and really the order chaos alignment along with that in early edition as being, like, I think a big one. I think wounds is another one, and we kind of like put these ideas on the periphery, but even though they were on the periphery and even though they weren't core to, like, you could play Zweihander without them, they were on your character sheet, and so it was hard to ignore them if you're a player sitting down for the first time and saying, how do I use this? And so I guess I would say to answer 8-Bit's question first, like, I think that one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that you can do a one shot pretty easily, the same way that you can do a D&D one shot really easily for new players and get them in, and it's easy. If you're used to teaching people D&D, I don't think you're going to have any trouble with the learning curve for Zweihander. That said, there are certainly way easier, more simple games out there. And if you're approaching somebody who's intimidated by dice rolling, intimidated by characters, intimidated by whatever, first off, I think people typically lose that very quickly. Like, if they enjoy the idea of an RPG, once they find that they enjoy it, then typically they lose a lot of inhibitions that way. But, certainly, like, Reforged's way simpler. The character sheet's way simpler. The rules are way simpler than D&D or Zweihander. So there's definitely new player friendly games from that respect. But the other side I would note is that sometimes it's not the easiest mechanics that'll get a new player hooked on a game. Sometimes it's the right mechanics that do the thing that they're excited about. And my big example for that, I know I've talked to these two yahoos about it extensively, is Alien RPG. Not the simplest RPG out there, but anybody who loves Alien, I can get them hooked on RPGs if they sit down and play that game, because the mechanics that are in there reinforce the narrative styles that we're trying to tell, and it makes it better. So I think the note there is like, if what your players want is dark fantasy that's a little bit brutal and they want to tell that sort of a story, they want to play a mean game, as Troy said, then I think they're going to embrace all the complexity that Zweihander has to offer. But if they want a beer and pretzels, I don't want to think about it, and I want to be the hero, big name hero every time, like, I think it's fair to say, like, we may not be the game to start them off with, because there's probably something that's going to fit that idea.
You could do it.
Right at the gate.
You could definitely do it, but it does other things way better.
And to Craig's note, like, 100%, I think, Daniel, you and I had conversations so along with that, like, one shots and early experiences, it's just so hard to showcase the order chaos alignment system, or the corruption system. And I don't think that all of that is necessarily going to go away with the new edition. Like, so now we've kind of refined it all to where you just have to earn 10 points of corruption and you get a malignancy, right? Like, it's that simple. There's not like this scale, and you're not, keeping track in the different ways, and it's not quite as complex. But at the end of the day, you still got to earn 10 corruption points in order to gain a malignancy, and that's probably not going to happen on a one shot. So corruption probably isn't going to matter that much in the first, if you play a one shot or a two shot. Like, it's probably not going to be a thing that you really have to think about. So yeah, I would say that there's going to be pieces of the game that you're not going to realize, or they aren't going to be fully realized unless you're playing 6, 8, 20 sessions. But I think that's okay, because I think the underlying game is still robust and still has a lot to offer, and those mechanics can be kind of quietly set to the side, as I do in my how to play games at conventions, and you don't feel like you're missing something.
Yeah. I think that there are some games that are easy to learn and easy to master. It's a Merkborg. There are some games that are easy to learn and hard to master, like D&D. Zweihander falls somewhere in the middle there. Like every great game, great games with depth have a tendency to be difficult to master. You have to play it a lot, because there's a lot of layers there that contribute toward being a long-term game. I mean, there's a reason why Merkborg is only meant to be played across a couple sessions. It is the end of the world. It's narratively true. And the game is very easy to learn and very easy to master. Zweihander is not that, but it's very easy to teach, because it's fundamentals of a skill-based system and an elementary system of understanding percentile-based levels of success is very easy to intuit. But I do want to address the character growth corruption thing. I think this is a really good comment. In fact, when we started this journey with Reforged, we recognized that. We recognized that when we would sit down at a convention or a game store and run a one-shot, players would be like, what's this order and chaos alignment thing? And what's corruption? And the reality is that specific game pattern was really only relevant to long-term play, long-term campaigns. So we knew that we wanted to kind of carry some of that forward into Reforged. So we turned that into tragic flaws and inner strengths. In fact, when you play towards those in Zweihander, you gain reward points to grow your character every session. But we also knew we wanted to kind of remove the morality-based corruption mechanic and turn it into this idea of gaining corruption for being exposed to corruptive things like reading profane text and performing cultish rituals, and for striking deals with beyonders and all these other terrible things. So what we figured out along the way is that we could help players realize the outcomes of corruption, as opposed to having to wait 10 plus sessions. We can make it happen in 2 to 3. And we could also make those personality traits, which was previously order and chaos alignment, now they're tragic flaw and inner strength, a little bit more relevant in the game. And because that's how you gain reward points and how you can grow your character. So we definitely addressed that in Reforged. That was actually one of the very first redesign sessions, was to figure out like, how do we like break this thing we've created and recreate it that's still fun and intriguing and interesting and still has this like prominent place on the survivor sheet. So
Val-
yeah.
Valandar in chat is saying similar to like asking like sanity loss from Call of Cthulhu. In
Ooh.
some ways, that's not a bad example or comparison, but I think sanity is an interesting thing in Call of Cthulhu. I'll share my enthusiasm for that system for just a second, but like sanity's cool because it's a stat that you're putting to use, right? Just like any other stat, but then you can also spin down that stat, which is cool. Like this choice of and then also you and then luck is another stat. I mean, that's also cool. But like the loss of sanity over time is very cool. I think like the note here is that corruption isn't something that builds forever. It builds up to 10 points. You gain a malignancy, which is this like outward manifestation of corruption of the abyss, kind of influencing your physical form in some way, shape, or form. And then you reset to 0. And then you build. And once you hit 10 again, you'll gain another malignancy. So it's not like this stat that is building that is going to be a huge detriment to you mechanically. It's a narrative detriment in that whenever you're then showcasing those malignancies around, good, reasonable, healthy people that aren't corrupted by demon spawn, you're probably going to have some problems.
Yeah. I just to kind of so Valandar, he said like sanity loss. So I have a different perspective on it. I've played a lot of Call of Cthulhu in my younger days, and I always kind of viewed as Call of Cthulhu as a race to insanity, and that was fun when I was younger. I liked that kind of gameplay because I wasn't quite mature enough quite yet to understand like what it really meant. So when I thought about what that meant for Zweihander, now as a 47-year-old man, I was thinking about, well, in Call of Cthulhu, you lose your character to sanity, and that's not fun. Like the most interesting thing you can do in a game is to kill a character. It's just boring. There are better things you could do as a game master to do to a player that is perhaps equally as punishing, but also narratively awesome. So the idea that malignancies actually kind of give you quote powers, they reflect your person changing to what Zach's mentioned before, and really the foundation of this is if you look back in English mythology, European mythology, and Japanese mythology, most monsters were people who did bad things. And all of these malignancies reflect some of that. As an example, vampirism is a malignancy. Lycanthropy is a malignancy. There's a number of different ones that you can gain, and you can use them to your benefit. But of course, as Zach mentioned, the more often you use them, the more corruption you gain. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you want to lean into like being an incredibly malignant person, you want to lean into like vampirism, the more and more you use it, the more corruption you'll gain, and the more likely you are to turn into the very monsters you're fighting. And that was the big discovery in this redesign process with corruption was we don't need this scale of order and chaos to be able to reflect what that is. We could do it in a more mature, nuanced way, and we can also enable players who just want to play like wildly, different people. But we can also do it in an empathetic way in the sense that our malignancies aren't physical impairments, like real-world physical impairments. That was also kind of a distinct change too, and we owe a lot to Kate Bullock for helping guide us on that. I would say that's probably one of the biggest gaps looking back in revised core rulebook where I felt we needed the most work. So long story short, corruption has turned into something that's a little bit more prevalent and can be done in 2 to 3 sessions if you want, but it also becomes a fun thing to use if that's the type of character you want to play. So
you've gamified the whole idea of you either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. Well done.
This is a Batman game.
Yeah.
Or a Two-Face game again. I have John and Troy. I want to make sure that we get more. I had another topic that was like perfect for our show. So I guess like I'm going to pitch this to John and Troy to see what their interest levels are here before, and then we can dive into it, or we can dive into something else. But one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about in the Kickstarter page or in any videos that I thought Geeks Camp might be a great spot to kind of sit for a minute was the third-party aspect of Zweihander. So pitching this to John and Troy, I guess, is like, you know, I don't know how much you guys know or have followed necessarily what we've been working on there, but like, what do you think your interest level is? I guess is probably an unfair question considering, but what do you think? Well, let me rephrase that. What do you guys think the interest level would be for something like that, and what would you say would be like the necessities for a Zweihander third party creator content program to make sure that it's robust?
I don't know, but go ahead, Troy.
I guess I think the interest would probably be pretty high, just because, I mean, look at what has happened with Morkborg and Mothership, and I mean even Shadow Dark now. You've got all these people creating these amazing things using these systems, and I think it's going to be the same with Zweihander when people get their hands on it and they see what it can do and what it can bring to your table. That's going to open up a lot of, you're going to have people say, oh, I'm changing what I was using for my game because this makes more sense, because otherwise, everybody would just be using D&D all the time. But you've got all these people using all these other systems, and I think Zweihander is going to be the same thing.
I think it also creates an ecosystem of engagement, right? You propagate additional interest by kind of like spiraling outward, right? The core of the system is Zweihander, but then people are utilizing it, and really what it does, it acts as a funnel back towards the origin point. You may have as it spreads out, you may have folks that kind of only have proximal awareness of Zweihander, but they know a little bit about these auxiliary arms of it. But then again, they continue to pull it back towards the center, which is going to be good for the system in general, right? And I think that we all have stories that we want to tell, and if you give people tools and assets and a space to tell their stories using a system that they really enjoy or they like or that they engage with, there's also a possibility of farming out talent through the community and finding people that are incredibly passionate and talented, and then loop them in and pull them into the fold, so to speak. And kind of like that's one of the things that I've appreciated about, if nothing else, one of the things the DM's Guild and the OGL has done in the 5e era is it has given people a means by which they can take their creative efforts and put them out into the public for consumption, review, enjoyment, etc. And it also assists them in building a portfolio of creative efforts that they can then go back to, that they can take to they can either that they can build off of for themselves, and they can create additional adventures or products, or they can take those to different publishing agencies or creative agencies and show them the work that they've done. So I like that just as a creator. It's kind of like opening up the black box and allowing people to play with the tools that are inside, and it's all rising tides raise all ships when we do that.
Yeah, I think so if you're not aware, chat, you can go onto the Kickstarter page or onto the Zweihander website, Zweihander on wogdy.com, and you can check out. We've got the official license up and usable. It's active. Obviously, we still appreciate feedback and notes, and like we want to pay attention to all that, but we wanted to get it out there before the Kickstarter launch. So the reality is, there's third party. You can make third party content for Zweihander right now. We don't want any of your money. We don't want any of your ideas or ownership of your ideas or properties. We want you to go and make cool stuff, and we want you to use our system to do it if that makes sense for you. You can go you can go read that license at your leisure. I think, some of the things that we talked about, and I think are on the, we're trying to figure out how to make all of them work and in what timeline. But, we've chatted with, I think, to your point, John, a mountain of Morkborg, Mothership, OSE, 5e creators here on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, to me, that gives us, that gives our crew, the Wogdy crew, a lot of insight that maybe others don't have about, what are the needs of a third party community?
Mm-hmm.
What do they get excited about? What is the bare minimum? But what also is the things that they wish for, right? So I know, one of our big objectives is asset packs, template packs, things like that, to where, hey, you want to make your thing look a lot like an official Zweihander thing? Let's give you the tool set to do that. Things of that nature. But not just that. One of the things that we talked about, not to put too much of a detriment, because they are improving in this way. I've seen a couple posts in the last few months, but we talked about how Wizards of the Coast hesitates to even talk about Adventures League on their socials, right? And one of the things that we talked about was the obligation is probably too strong of a word, but the pseudo responsibility of the core property and core publisher to support and promote their affiliates, the people that choose to use their system to produce things. And so I don't think we know exactly what that looks like this moment, but I think we're working on it. The idea of, you made a Zweihander product, you shouldn't feel alone when it comes to putting that out into the world and putting eyes on it and doing all those things that John talked about, getting, participation and encouragement and feedback and blah, 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 blah. We think that maybe we owe you a little bit of support in that area and getting word out about it. So I think those are areas of exploration. But Daniel, are we covering that in a good way, a reasonable way?
Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of recognize where where this kind of started with Revised Core Rulebook too. Revised Core Rulebook was released under Creative Commons license. The words were, not the artwork. So you could take that and kind of create your own thing as long as you didn't monetize it. And that kind of evolved over time. Once this is back before I was working with Andrew McNeil, I was still an independent creator. I worked with Drive-Thru RPG to set up a Grim and Perilous library, and that was supposed to be the kind of DM's guild for Zweihander. Once I moved on to Andrew McNeil, Adam and Nick, who took on ownership of Grim and Perilous Studios, they grew that program pretty significantly. And I think right now it's 274 products sitting on Drive-Thru RPG. But the limitation there, and this is not Grim and Perilous's fault by any means. This is just the fact of the matter. The only place you can monetize that was on Drive-Thru RPG. But if we look at other successful programs, in particular Merkborg and Dragonbane, I think those are best in class for how you can treat third-party creators. Let them create, let them go and fundraise, let them set up Patreons, let them set up YouTube channels, let them set up Kickstarter, and let them create and let them own their things and release their things, and we're there to support it, and we're there to kind of help enablement. And I feel that what we've done with our new third-party license is that we've taken these kind of lessons learned, just like we've done with Reforged with its history through Revised Core Rulebook and Starter Kit. We've taken these lessons, we've listened to our community, and we've really kind of created a third-party license that opens the doors for creators to create things. So, our Discord is filled with what we kind of call our librarians, and those are people who've created third-party content for Zweihander to date. And now that we have this kind of expanded third-party license, I think many of them are going to start doing fundraising on Kickstarter themselves, and that's really cool. Granted, I'm not Johan or anyone else on the Merkborg side, but I can only imagine how tickled they get when they see a kick-ass Kickstarter do something they didn't anticipate or expect or create themselves do really well. That's it. We create these kind of small little love letters to the games that we create, and to me, a third-party program is that, and hopefully it leads to other creators being able to spin off and work on their own as an independent creator. That's the big dream, right? We can all do this full time, And the only way we can do that is by supporting one another. I think big lessons learned definitely from the OGL fallout. That D&D is a folk language, RPGs are a folk language, and if we can enable people to talk freely and have different conversations about our games and iterate against what we did and create their own things, to me that's like the perfect alchemy of a successful third-party program. And I'm hoping that I think it's definitely well received by the existing librarians, but now our job is to get the word out and then to help support third-party creators by promoting their things on our website, by helping them move sales, by consulting with them on marketing if they need it, by talking with them about doing print runs. I think there's a lot of opportunity, much like how John mentioned, like you kind of take these things and you can kind of help boost up other creators. To me, that's like the best outcome of this third-party program as we kind of roll it out with this Kickstarter, is that hopefully it encourages people to create their own things and do things that are unexpected and neat and be able to monetize it however they want.
Awesome. We're getting close to the end of chat time here. Troy, John, any notes that are still stuck in your craw?
I don't think so. I think everything's been covered.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think there's a couple of avenues. Chad, if you have questions, this is the perfect time to drop them in, and we can roll with it. I think that maybe something that could be a little bit fun here is talking about. We can do it in a really short way. So if there's questions, we can still get to those. But one of the things that we haven't talked about a lot on the Kickstarter as well, I think we maybe do a little bit in future updates, but it's not a secret, I think. We've unlocked 8 digital adventures, right? And I started this stream talking about how a lot of people put a lot of time into it, and certainly not nearly all of those people are on the stream. So we have 8 adventures that have been unlocked. We're working towards another 4. These are largely written by guest writers. Daniel, I thought maybe we could do like a little taste, give people a little taste of what they can expect, because really all the Kickstarter says at the moment is digital adventure, right? And that's that doesn't say a lot other than something, right? So is there something we can tease people with, or give a little bit more detail about what they can expect there?
Yeah, so I'm actually I'm pulling up an email. I apologize, I'm looking away from the camera for a moment. I'm pulling up an email from Stephen Radamir McFarland, and he and I spoke very early on about kind of a shared love of like war stories. We were thinking about what if it was a horror story set during war. So his pitch, I don't think he'll mind me sharing this out, but I think it's pretty cool. He wants to create this short adventure called The City of Silence. So sent to scout the path forward from a massive army making its way through enemy lands, you approach its next target. Once bustling with trade and riches to plunder, a port city is as quiet as a mausoleum. Its gates are flung wide open, streets and buildings lie empty as if abandoned for a century. But it's not a ruin. There's no detritus, no rubble, no dust, no signs of haste and flight. But something permeates the place. Sibilant sounds play at the edge of perception. Something calls you to the heart of desolation. Will you find silence? Will you find answers? Or will you find damnation? I was really intrigued by this when Stephen pitched it. I think it really plays into the themes of Zweihander, but more importantly, it plays to things that Stephen's really passionate about. And to me, that's the perfect alchemy for a great game, is when you have somebody who can not just create something for a system, but create something in a narrative that they absolutely love. Another one would be Elizabeth. I forgive me, Liz. I can't fully pronounce your last name, but she also has this really interesting overview of the adventure. It's called The Memory Well. She and I spoke a lot about personal tragedy and horror stories and how that can come to be within an adventure. So she has written this really cool concept for that she'll be writing for us. But we have a number of great writers who are also creating. We have Kate Bullock, Anna Goldberg, Zach, Jared, Will Tramp, Stephen Hamilton, some other names we haven't really talked about publicly yet either. But we wanted to really showcase, I think, with these adventures, the ways that you could take the themes of Zweihander and change them, and to tell the types of stories you want to tell. So these won't necessarily all be dark fantasy horror tales. Some of them may be a little more fairy horror. Some may be just strict, lighter fantasy. We want to kind of see how elastic the system really is. And these adventures, kind of in the same way that Dark Astral started, become these seedlings for something that could become something bigger. So we'll be talking more about these adventures as time marches on through the Kickstarter. But of all the concepts I've read from Richard August and everyone else down the line, they're really cool and they're unexpected. And to me, like I said, it's the best thing to see as a creator is when somebody pitches something to you that's like the thing that you didn't expect, and it takes the game in a direction I would have never considered. So to me, that's the thing I'm really looking forward to with these adventures.
Nice. That's a perfect tease. Yeah, I'm jacked. Like, John, Troy, I don't know what your favorite type of stretch goals are, but one of my favorite things to do with a Kickstarter when we're putting together a Kickstarter is talk about stretch goals. Because I have strong opinions there, and we've talked about those strong. We all have strong opinions about stretch goals, I think. But like one of the things that I always say is like, certain types of stretch goals are only applicable to certain types of people, right? Like, well, I'll give one that we're doing on the page because why not? Why not shoot shots my direction every once in a while? But like if you put a thing that says, "Hey, we're putting gilded edges on on the collector's books," right? Well, that's only affecting people who buy the collector's book and that care about gilded edges, right? There's other types of things that are like, "Hey, we're gonna add." We're gonna add a bunch of new character options or something like that, which is cool, right? Like added that to the game. But one of the things that I have said on the show before, and that I really love to pitch is like if you're putting out a core rule book, the first thing that you need to be thinking about doing after that is giving people ways to play it. I think we talked about it, and I adore this setting and I adore this book. So this is not a negative overall, but like we talked about Everon heavily, Troy, right? And like why that book doesn't have an adventure in it is beyond me, right? Because it's such a great setting, and then to just kind of like let it go until Adventures like picked it up is like crazy to me. So to me, saying, hey, best foot forward, like it's really exciting that we're committing and doing like a bunch of adventures right out the gate to where when you get your book, it's not, okay, you guys go figure out how to make adventures, or what to do for your first one shot or blah, 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 or it's like, here's a whole bunch of things for you to pull from and start off. I don't know. This part gets me really excited. I don't know about you guys. Are there different types of stretch goals that you guys like more or that you think are better improvements, or where does adventures fall on that side for you?
I think adventures are a no-brainer. First off, adding at least 2 to 3 adventures, depending on the size of the project, obviously. But
yeah.
I think that because, and I don't think they need to be huge. I think they can be just one shots because what they're really supposed to be, they could be bolted together, right? If there's a continuing overarching narrative, but at the very least it gives you like you have all of the tools to work within the setting, but you kind of need to see the movie first or like an episode of it first to really understand what it is that you're kind of getting into and to really glom onto it and get the themes down and things like that. So like I said, I think that's table stakes is what I would say for that. I think also is like I personally like things that improve and expand upon what I'm already investing in. Right, like if I'm at the ground level, I'm buying into the baseline product. What I like is more like I want more art so that it looks prettier. If it means a second pass at editing or layout and design, or for things to look better, flow better, be worded better, more like paying playtesters, whatever that is, right? Or it's just I like the extra bits, like the stuff that. If we can make it happen, we'll do it within the confines of the budget. But if we blow this thing out of the water, we have some ideas for things that we want to do to expand upon the baseline product. And then what that does is like that the impetus for me is that I'm contributing as a part of the the expansive success of it, instead of just making the least common denominator of what you're trying to produce possible. I want to see the best form of whatever it is. And to me, like the only problem you can have with that is like you go too far, right? If you make too many promises, you traject, you have instead
Rob
of
Schwab.
right. Well, yeah, you have instead of a handful of stretch goals, you have just like a bajillion of them that you are never going to be able to fulfill, or it's going to take you that much. It's going to be that much harder for you to fulfill it, or it's going to take you that much more time to get it fulfilled. Right, and you're just you're not just making more work for yourself. You are kicking the can further down the road from being able to deliver the product.
I want a plushy two-headed sword. That's the stretch goal I want. No, it's like same stuff. It's like I want, and I like what Eric said. He likes stuff that's Kickstarter specific. Things that you're not going to be able to get afterwards.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's cool, and then sometimes it's like, oh man, I don't want to place that high. But yeah, I do like that idea of something that makes me feel like because I was the early adopter, I got a cool thing. I definitely do like that. Adventures, obviously, yes. You know, I want to see what. Because to me, the Marvel RPG, the Marvel Multiverse RPG, is the better example than Eberron. Give me an adventure because I want to know what the designer was thinking, how the game is going to be played. So that then I can either play through it and go, yeah, no, I'm not playing it that way. I'm playing it this way. Or, oh, I totally get it, and I'm in. You kind of need that. Like crib notes almost kind of a thing, but yeah, I like to 3D print, so STL files are always cool as stretch goals. Not so much of
good news for you.
Yeah, not so much of a dice.
Yeah,
dice thing where people add dice in. Yeah, just interesting and unique things that are specifically for this. Whatever those forms may take, as long as one of them is a plushy two-headed sword.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think we have another STL expert in our chat, so I appreciate.
I think so.
Yeah. Good to see you, Bill. Yeah, I love.
Bill.
Yeah. I think without getting too further into these weeds, like I hope that what you see when we reveal these stretch goals and when we talk about these stretch goals, and yes, by the way, Bill, you are absolutely right. We are not truly, but in a way, fishing for last minute stretch goal ideas because holy crap, we need them. But hopefully, what you see with our reveals are like, hey, we care. We feel like we have a good grasp on what content is going to be actually useful to folks. But also, to Troy's point, and to John's point, what content isn't going to push us so far into left field that all of a sudden we've lost the vision and we've lost the timeline and we're over here. So that's always the hardest part of a Kickstarter, and we could spend a whole stream just talking about that, right? Like, how do you keep the vision of what the Kickstarter is all the way through, and how do you not how does reward tiers, add-ons, stretch goals, timelines, shipping, all of these things start to always are trying to binge you into a different pathways, and you gotta kind of keep in mind what's the actual objective here. We could spend a lot of time here, but I think very clearly we know the objective, which is Zweihander needs to be out there. It's out of print. We want it back into the hands of people. We want to be the people to do it. We don't want to do it alone. We want other people to come with us. And so hopefully the Kickstarter is about really communicates building community, creator community, player community, and running forward with that. Hopefully we're doing the right thing there. Guys, I think we got to wrap this up. We've been streaming now for about an hour and a half. I really appreciate chat for hanging out. Daniel, any last things that we want to say to folks?
Yeah, I just want to. I realize this is my platform to talk. So I'm gonna talk for a few minutes. I'm really just kind of over the moon with the support that our fans, old and new, have shown Zweihander. I know we had some ideas around what we thought we would hit in the first day, and this kind of blew what my expectations were out of the water. I think that it shows that that the fans around Zweihander are passionate, that the creator community and the player community have been continuing to drive interest, despite the fact that Zweihander was in flux for about half a year. The Polygon article came out today and said, dead game comes back to life, and that's kind of true. Zweihander was in a very perilous position until Zach and Jared and World of Game Design kind of came in and swept me and the game up and said, "Hey, let's make this thing is awesome. Let's make it together." So I want to thank the fans who have really kind of helped us get to where we want to get to and more today. It fills me with hope, gives me the creative fuel I need to make more cool things. Gets me excited about Dark Astral, gets me excited about Gangs Gehabro, these adventures we're releasing, and the future of Zweihander World of Game Design. Thank you all, both people who have been playing Zweihander, and thank the three of you as well for platforming Zweihander. It takes a village to make an RPG. I learned this very valuable lesson doing it on my own for many years. And if Zweihander is to continue is how we want it to, it's going to take a lot of people to make it happen. So I'm really excited for the future, and thank you everybody for who's pledged so far. And even if you can't pledge, please do just share out the link. Every little bit helps. Just kind of keep your eyes on the Kickstarter. We'll be talking more about the cool new adventures we're going to unlock, as well as some really fun stretch goals we haven't showed beneath the fire yet that I'm equally excited about. And some of those may be VTT related. So stay tuned.
Yes. Perfect. Troy, John, I think we would be remiss if we didn't wrap up this episode with saying people can meet you in the person, in the flesh. They have a special once in a lifetime opportunity. It's called Gary Con. It's next week. Troy and John will be there. John will be running like a heathen. John will be running a Warhammer Fantasy game.
You asked me to, man. Don't put that on me, Bobby Boucher. Don't you put that on me.
It's a brother Seamus, not a heathen.
I'll shift. We're still got a week, man.
No, listen. Cubicle 7 and Warhammer Fantasy is incredibly awesome. And they've been very, very cool. We don't have to get into that tonight, but they'll be very, very cool about the fact of being super supportive of our endeavors in Zweihander, while also making Warhammer Fantasy an awesome game. So we're excited to do the same and support them. So it's super cool. But yeah, John's there. He's going to be running some games. He's going to be in the D&D area some too. He's going to be at the booth doing demos. Troy's going to be at the booth hanging out, doing some stuff there. If you're at Adepticon, I'll be there running with the Modifius crew, helping them. So we're going to be all over the place next week. And we'd love to see you. If you're in the area of Adepticon or GaryCon, we'd love for you to stop by and say, hey. I think that's super exciting. I think the other thing that I want to point people to is we're going to be doing several live streams over the course of the next several weeks about Zweihander. So you can expect Daniel and I hopping in and chatting some more. If we can get Jared to align his videos, we're going to try to get him in. We're going to be continuing all our live stream Zweihander game every 2 weeks. So there's a lot of Zweihander content. There's also a lot of just other content that we're going to be putting out as well. Keep an eye on Geek Camp. John, Troy, I think they're going to try to ease back out of the sabbatical and back into annoying the heck out of you for a while. I
wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. So we're excited about doing all that. Super, super excited. Last but not least, I want to note that we kind of wrapped up our recruitment for Origins. But get ready, because in the next few days we're going to be offering up signups for Gen Con and Nova Open. So if you want to come game with us and you want to hang out with us, run the games that we're running, Shack up with a lot of us, have dinner with us, all those sorts of fun things, late night conversations. Gen Con and Nova Open are going to be your next opportunity. We'll do that, post it on probably Facebook, the Discord, things like that, when you can get the signups, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Fellas, is there anything I'm missing as we close the door here? Troy, John?
I don't think so.
Lock it in.
No. Cool. All right. John, Troy, thanks for holding down the fort. Thanks for hanging out. Daniel, thanks for joining us this evening. Jared, if you're watching, thanks for the attempt at joining us this evening. We'll catch you again in the next few days, hopefully. And chat, holy crap, chat! Thanks for being so active this evening. It means very, very much to us. It means the world. So thank you a lot. And we'll get ready to do some more streaming in the next few days. And until then, we'll see you next time.
Play some great Zweihander, everybody. And if you know, you know.
I would usually say be kind, but this is Zweihander, so be mean. Don't stay safe.
Watch out.
Jump into the mouth of danger and have fun. How about them apples?
Yeah, but there's consequences.
There are consequences to your actions. Yeah, and you know what? Don't kill the goblin. It might be his birthday.